At the dawn of the 20th century, Europe stood at the height of power and progress. The continent was a patchwork of empires: the British, French, Russian, Austro-Hungarian, and German. It was an age of invention, industry, and imperial ambition. Railways linked capitals. Telegraphs sent messages across continents. Airships floated over gleaming cities. But beneath the surface, rivalries simmered. Decades of military alliances, colonial competition, and national pride had woven a web of tension so intricate that a single spark could ignite it. Germany, newly unified in 1871 after defeating France in the Franco-Prussian War, sought its place in the sun. France longed for revenge and the recovery of Alsace-Lorraine. Britain guarded its empire and navy with watchful caution. Russia aspired to influence in the Balkans, while Austria-Hungary struggled to hold its diverse peoples together. The peace was uneasy, a peace built not on trust, but on deterrence. Beneath these displays of might, alliances formed like invisible threads. The Triple Alliance bound Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. The Triple Entente united France, Russia, and Britain. Europe was divided into two armed camps. No one could imagine that the prosperity of this age would soon give way to its darkest tragedy. On June 28, 1914, in Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, rode through the city with his wife, Sophie. They were there to inspect imperial troops, a show of power in a restive province recently annexed by the empire. But among the onlookers stood a group of young Serbian nationalists, members of a secret society known as the Black Hand. They believed Bosnia should belong to a greater Serbia. As the Archduke's car passed along the Apel Quay, one of them, Gavrilo Princip, stepped forward. 2 gunshots echoed. The heir to the throne and his wife were dead. Europe held its breath. What began as an act of nationalist violence soon set in motion the machinery of empires. Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia and, with Germany's backing, issued an ultimatum demanding impossible concessions. Serbia, supported by Russia, resisted. Within weeks, the system of alliances turned a Balkan crisis into a world war. On July 28, 1914, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. Russia mobilized. Germany declared war on Russia and then on France. When German armies invaded neutral Belgium, Britain declared war on Germany. By early August, all of Europe was engulfed in flames. In the summer of 1914, millions marched to war with banners, bands, and boundless enthusiasm. They believed it would be over by Christmas. No one could yet imagine the years of mud, blood, and stalemate that awaited. Germany's war plan, the Schlieffen Plan, called for a swift invasion of France through Belgium, crushing French resistance before Russia could mobilize. The German advance was rapid and brutal. Belgian cities like Liège and Leuven fell amid fierce resistance. Civilians fled burning villages. The word atrocity became part of daily vocabulary. But the French and British rallied at the Battle of the Marne in early September. French taxis carried troops to the front in a desperate counterattack that halted the German advance just 30 miles from Paris. The German army fell back and dug in. So did the Allies. The Western Front solidified into a 400-mile line of trenches stretching from the North Sea to Switzerland. The war of movement had ended. The war of mud had begun. Life in the trenches was a world of endurance. Men slept in mud, ate from tins, and lived under constant shell fire. Lice, disease, and exhaustion were as deadly as bullets. The landscape became a nightmare. Trees splintered into stumps, the earth churned into cratered moonscapes. Days of boredom were shattered by minutes of terror. A whistle, a rush over the top, and machine guns cutting through the morning mist. Gas warfare added new horror. At Ypres in 1915, the Germans unleashed chlorine gas, a weapon so cruel it burned lungs and blinded men. Soon, all sides adopted masks and retaliated with their own poisons. Artillery ruled the battlefield. Shells pounded trenches for days before offensives. The noise was ceaseless, the ground trembling like a living thing. The Western Front became a graveyard of youth, the lost generation. Entire towns would never see their sons return. In February 1916, Germany struck at Verdun, a fortress city on the Meuse River. Its goal: bleed France white. The attack opened with the heaviest artillery barrage the world had yet seen. Over 1 million shells in a single day. For months, French and German troops fought for every hill and bunker. The motto of the French defense became "Ils ne passeront pas," they shall not pass. Men rotated in and out along the so-called Sacred Way, a single road that stayed open despite endless bombardment. Verdun consumed over 700,000 casualties in 10 months, yet neither side gained more than a few miles. The ancient fortress had become a symbol of endurance, of madness, and of a war without end. To relieve pressure on Verdun, the British and French launched a joint offensive along the Somme River in July 1916. At 7:30 a.m. on July 1st, the first wave advanced, believing the week-long artillery bombardment had destroyed German defences. It had not. In one day, the British Army suffered nearly 60,000 casualties, the worst day in its history. Among the noise and smoke rolled a new weapon, the tank. A slow, armoured machine meant to cross trenches and barbed wire. It promised future change, but in 1916 it was unreliable and few in number. By November, the Battle of the Somme had cost over 1 million lives for less than 10 miles of ground. The Western Front remained deadlocked. While the West bogged down, the Eastern Front stretched from the Baltic to the Black Sea. Here, war was more fluid, but equally brutal. Russia's early defeats at Tannenberg and the Masurian Lakes left hundreds of thousands captured. The empire's fragile infrastructure began to crack. In the Balkans, Serbia was crushed. In the Middle East, the Ottoman Empire joined the Central Powers, opening new fronts from Gallipoli to Mesopotamia. British, Australian, and New Zealand forces landed on the Gallipoli Peninsula in 1915, attempting to seize the Dardanelles. After months of hopeless fighting and disease, they withdrew. Another costly failure. Across the seas, colonial troops from India, Africa, and Canada joined the struggle, transforming Europe's conflict into a world war. By 1917, exhaustion and hunger gripped every nation. In Russia, strikes and mutinies swept through the army and cities. Tsar Nicholas II abdicated. The Russian Revolution began. By year's end, the Bolsheviks seized power and signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, pulling Russia out of the war and ceding vast territories to Germany. Meanwhile, at sea, Germany resumed unrestricted submarine warfare, sinking civilian ships, including the Lusitania, and drawing condemnation worldwide. Intercepted telegrams, such as the Zimmermann note proposing a German-Mexican alliance, pushed the United States closer to intervention. On April 6, 1917, the U.S. declared war on Germany, entering the conflict with fresh troops and vast industrial strength. President Woodrow Wilson spoke of making the world safe for democracy. Freed from the Eastern Front, Germany launched a massive spring offensive in 1918, hoping to win before U.S. forces arrived in full. For a moment, it nearly succeeded. Shells fell again near the Marne, within reach of Paris. But exhausted divisions could not sustain the attack. Then the Allies countered with the 100 Days Offensive. Backed by American manpower and improved coordination between infantry, tanks, and aircraft, they broke through the Hindenburg Line. German morale collapsed. Mutinies erupted in the Navy and on the home front. At 11 a.m. on November 11, 1918, the guns fell silent. The armistice took effect. After 4 years, the Great War was over. The cost was staggering. Over 16 million dead, 20 million wounded, millions more displaced. Entire landscapes, Flanders, Verdun, the Somme, were reduced to wastelands. Empires that had ruled for centuries collapsed. The German Kaiser abdicated. Austria-Hungary dissolved into new nations. The Ottoman Empire vanished from the map. In Russia, civil war raged. At Versailles, in 1919, victors dictated terms to the defeated. Germany accepted guilt for the war and crushing reparations. The League of Nations was born, intended to preserve peace, but without the United States, which refused to ratify the treaty. Economies faltered. Veterans struggled to rebuild lives, and a deadly influenza pandemic swept the globe, claiming more lives than the war itself. World War I changed everything. Old empires gave way to modern states. Monarchs fell, ideologies rose. Airplanes, tanks, and machine guns had forever altered warfare. The map of Europe was redrawn, sowing tensions that would lead 2 decades later to another global conflict. Culturally, the war left scars on an entire generation. Poets like Wilfred Owen and Siegfried Sassoon captured its disillusionment. Memorials filled city squares across continents. The Great War had promised to be the war to end all wars. Instead, it became a grim prelude to the century of upheaval that followed. Over a century later, the lessons of the First World War remain urgent. National pride, unchecked rivalries, and technological arrogance combined to unleash a catastrophe few believed possible. And yet, amid the devastation, there was courage, ordinary people enduring extraordinary times. From the mud of Flanders to the frozen forests of the East, millions wrote a shared chapter in human history. The Great War ended on paper in 1918, but its echoes still shape the world we live in today.